This is how to make an oil change by Mark and Aaron. Before you start anything, you have to have the right materials. Some of these materials include oil, a drain pan to drain the oil into, a filter, and make sure it's the right one, a shop rag just to clean up any oil that gets on you, or just clean up the underside of the car a little bit, a filter wrench in case the filter doesn't come off very easily, a funnel to pour the new oil back into it, and a drain plug wrench so that you can get the drain plug out and drain the old oil out. Also, before you start, the vehicle should be warm so that all the oil can cycle through the car, and that you'll get all the old oil out. And the first step is to release the hood. And before you let go of the hood, when you pick it up, check the prop rod to make sure that it's a solid foundation and that the hood's not going to fall on top of you. Then after you raise the hood, raise the vehicle using either the floor jack and jack stands or a lift, whether it be a 2-post or 4-post, doesn't really matter. And then after that, you got to locate the drain plug, make sure that it's not the automatic transmission fluid. Also, the drain plug location will depend on whether it's a 4-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, or all-wheel drive vehicle. Once you locate the drain plug, make sure you find the correct wrench. The measurement will be in either standard American, which will be like a fraction like 5/8 or 9/16, or metric, which will be like 17 millimeter, 19 millimeter, so on. And also, the easiest way to take it off is using a box end wrench. They usually work the best. Once you find the correct wrench, you can take the drain plug off, and then make sure you have your lift drain or your drain pan underneath, so that you can have something to drain the oil into. Once the oil is completely drained out, visually inspect the drain plug to make sure that the threads are still in good condition, and that the flats on the hexagonal top are not rounded off. And while the oil is draining, make sure you check for the oil, for the color and the smell. The color should be black, which means that it's used, and the smell should smell like a typical gasoline smell. Once you're done with the oil, then you can locate the oil filter and obtain the right wrench to take it off, if it doesn't come off by hand, which it should. Once you find the right wrench, remove the filter. Make sure you turn counterclockwise and not clockwise and tighten it. That'll harm the filter, and it'll make it more difficult to take it off. Once you take the oil filter off, make sure you check for the gasket. It's like a rubber ring that goes inside there, that comes with the gasket, or with the oil filter, excuse me. The gasket needs to come off, because if you leave it on and then try to put the new filter on, it'll double gasket, which can cause a leak in your car. Once you're ready to put on the new filter, match it up with the old one. Make sure the thread size is the same, like on the inner side of the circle, or inner side of the filter. Check for the same part number. It might not always be the same, but if you're using a similar filter, it should match up. Check for the gasket to make sure that it's in there. And then check just for the general physical size of the oil filter to make sure it'll fit onto the car. And then before you put on the filter, make sure you lube the new filter gasket with oil. This will make it easier to take off when you have to change your oil again. And like I said, make sure the old filter isn't on there. And then spin the filter on by hand. Make sure you don't cross thread, because that can not only ruin the threads in the filter, but it can ruin the threads on the vehicle, which would make it extremely difficult to put more filters on afterwards. And then once you put it on, tighten it up to specification, which means like once it's on tight, just try to tighten it like another 2/3 or 3/4 of a turn by hand. Don't over tighten it because you won't be able to get it off when you have to change it up again. And then once you're done putting the new filter on, you have to replace the drain plug to ready yourself to put in the new oil. Once again, don't like cross thread it or over tighten because it'll make it extremely difficult to take off. And once you're done putting the drain plug on, just check again for the filter and the drain plug. Make sure everything's in place. And then after that, you can lower your vehicle to make it easier to put oil back into the car. Alright, once the vehicle's down on all four wheels, you can locate the oil fill, which will be somewhere on or near the engine block. Just make a note that this is not the dipstick tube. The oil will not go through the dipstick tube, and it won't fill up the crankcase completely. If you use the dipstick tube to fill it up, make sure it's the oil fill. And before you put any new oil in, make sure you determine the capacity of the crankcase. This can be done using either the owner's manual or also these manuals called the Mitchell manuals. They'll give you pretty much anything you need on any kind of car. Then once you're ready and you know all the capacities and everything, you can fill the crankcase to about 1 quart below its maximum capacity or its recommended capacity. Make sure you use a funnel. This will keep it from spilling and make sure, and then it'll give you accurate readings on how much oil you put in. When I say crankcase, it's the same thing as like the oil tank or the oil pan. Alright, now you're ready to start the vehicle. It's still 1 quart below its recommended capacity, but this step is just to make sure that everything is working properly and that the oil filter and the drain plug are correctly in place. You should turn it on for about 10 seconds. When you turn the car on, there should be a light or gauge on your dashboard saying that the oil is okay, how much you put in. The light, if it's a light, it should go out in about 3 to 5 seconds, and if you have a gauge, it should go up to about 50 to 60 psi. And then while you check for the light, then you can just check to make sure there's no leaks under the car or near the oil filter or the drain plug. And then if everything's alright, then you can continue with the procedure. If not, just go back to where, or just check the drain plug and oil filter to make sure they're on correctly. And then if everything's alright, let the vehicle run for another 20 to 40 seconds after those 10 seconds. Then you can turn it off, and then you can add the last amount of oil to fill it up to its recommended capacity. Once you do that, check the dipstick. It should read up to the full line. If not, then you know that you probably have a leak somewhere. And then after you check the dipstick to make sure it's full, record the date and mileage, whether it be in a logbook or on the oil filter, or if you have a window sticker like some of the dealerships give you when you get oil changes. Just make sure you record it so you know when you have to do your next oil change. And then after that, you're pretty much finished with the oil change. And you're ready to go for another 3,000 miles or 3 months, depending on the weather, like where you live and stuff, and the driving conditions you have every day. So that's how to do an oil change.